Passover is just around the corner, but don't worry, I'm not here to get you scared or anything. I actually want to show you 5 of the strangest Haggadahs that were ever made. And at the end, I'd like to show you a version of one of them that I actually own. So the first one comes out of Spain in the 1300s, and it's known as the Sarajevo Haggadah. It is really unique to us today, but it's actually quite typical of the Haggadahs made during that time. It begins with what could best be described as a Gothic comic strip, which shows different scenes from the Bible all the way from the creation of the world to the Exodus. And one of my favorite panels in this comic strip is during the 10 plagues. For the plague of wild beasts, there's actually dragons in ancient Egypt. In fact, throughout this Haggadah, the artist draws different dragons all throughout the text, which is really strange. Speaking of animals that kind of don't really belong in the Haggadah, let's go to the second one called the Washington Haggadah that comes from Italy at the end of the 1400s. First of all, you can notice the difference in how they're dressed from the Spanish style that we just saw to the Italian style that they're dressed here. But also, there's this little image of a monkey holding a matzah. Yeah, I don't get it either. Yeah, okay, let's move on to number 3. In number 3, we have the Maxwell House Haggadah, specifically the 1964 edition. First, let me tell you a little bit about this Haggadah. It began to be published in New York in 1923 and has been published every year since, which makes it over 100 years old. It started to be published as part of a promotion to sell Maxwell House coffee, which was dubbed kosher for Passover starting in 1919. And in order to really cement the idea that this product is kosher for the holiday, they started to print the Haggadah, the quintessential book that showed their consumers that their product is kosher. What's really interesting about the 1964 edition is also when it depicts the 10 plagues, it actually shows 2 of the plagues twice and skips over another plague, which is really odd. Here, let me show you. So it starts with blood, frogs, lice, but then instead of wild animals, it shows lice again, skips wild animals, and then just jumps to pestilence, which again is really strange. And again, I don't know why it is. It's just another one of those strange Haggadahs. Okay, number 4. This Haggadah I also happen to own a copy of, and it's called the Emoji Haggadah, written entirely in emojis. Now, if it's your first time looking at it, it can be really overwhelming and you're like, I'm never gonna be able to read this, but it happens to be one of my favorite Haggadahs to use today, and I've been using it since it came out in 2019, and I've gotten pretty good at reading it, and so it's no longer much of a code to me anymore. And I'll show you how to read one in just a second. So let's look at the 10 plagues. Let's start with blood, frogs, bugs, wild animals, the death of animals, skin on fire, hail, locust, darkness, and the death of firstborn. This next one is the Manishtana, which goes, why is it not the same this night from all nights? So plural night. On all nights, again, we eat bread and non-bread, which in this case is matzah. This night, non-bread, matzah. On all nights, we eat vegetables, but this night, spicy or bitter. On all nights, we don't dip our food one time. This night, we dip it repeatedly. On all nights, we eat sitting or reclining, but this night we all reclined. If you're like me and into really strange Haggadahs and interesting things regarding Judaism, then I recommend picking it up. It's going to make your Magid very engaging. And it's just another example of a really strange Haggadah. Okay, number 5 is the one I promised you, and that is the really old Haggadah from the 1300s called the Bird's Head Haggadah. Now, what's notable about it is that most of the characters, all of the Jews, are depicted not as humans, but they have birds' heads, which is really strange. And another feature that they have is something called a Judenhut, which is this coned-shaped hat that was required for Jewish men to wear during the Middle Ages in the Rhineland. Now, the first thing to know is just because an article of clothing, like a hat, was enforced for Jews to wear, doesn't mean that Jews wore it in shame. They would wear it as a point of pride, just like many Jews today wear streimels or other types of hats that were at one point meant to be worn out of shame, but today is also worn out of pride. The artist might have drawn it to pridefully depict the Jewish characters. But why do the characters have birds' heads? Now, there's many ways to explain it, but it comes down to two main points. First, many of these communities practiced a very strict prohibition against drawing characters with human heads. And this is something that many Jewish communities observed and some still observe today. And it goes to the second of the 10 Commandments, which is all about drawing representations of nature, something called a graven image. And so these communities decided to avoid this issue by drawing their human characters with birds' heads, which is something that doesn't happen in nature, and so we're clear of that. But a deeper explanation is that, once again, these images are a point of pride, trying to depict their characters as elevated above nature, and not just trying to get the story stuck onto a few characters, but really trying to bring the characters into a realm that piques our imagination and takes us out of our day-to-day. And that makes it really cool, but also one of the strangest Haggadahs that were ever made. And recently, Koren publishers put out a Haggadah that has some of these images reprinted in a modern Haggadah, but what's really cool about it is that they made them into pop-ups. So if you enjoyed hearing about these really strange Haggadahs from history, I want to let you know that I'm working on a documentary about the illustrated history of the Haggadah that should be coming out real soon, and if it's already out, you should be seeing it pop up next to my face. If you're interested in learning about Jewish history and other things regarding Jewish traditions, my name is David and I'd like to welcome you to this channel where we explore all these topics here.